The majority of us magic users were still behind with our new beastkin, I guess you could say, allies, although they seemed to simply want to hold on to us for some reason. We stayed behind with them to try and work on their request to make themselves more human and more intelligent, more apt at being able to access the inherent magic that was buried deep within them. It was very easy for most of us magic users to actually see that what had happened is somebody had locked it away. Now, you would think this would be a simple step of just releasing it. However, it comes down to the fact that if you release the floodgates too fast, it can destroy you. And there was a very similar reaction of what would happen back when the humans decided to absorb too much power and release theirs. I was lucky in that they could release enough of my, shall we say, locks to allow me to become what I am, along with several others. However, it would take time for these new beastkins to actually be able to break their own locks. They would have to be able to manage their own physical abilities so that they could finally reach out to their true potential. However, we could not break it for them, not without killing them. So as we stayed behind and began to try and transmute each of them one at a time, that is, those that requested, only by request will we do this. But as we transformed each of them into a more humanish shape, which, yes, did mean that they still retained their more animalistic ears, sometimes nose, and always had the tail. Sometimes they even kept their more animalistic feet, but that was individually inclined. Many of the males decided to keep a bit more of their animalistic features than the females did. The females thought it would be, pretty to change themselves, and many of the other magic users were, I don't know how else to say this, they thought it was hot. Especially when we found one female that was, turned out she was middle-aged, but that didn't matter. She was basically a foxy lady, yes, I'll put that in quotes, and she decided she wanted to be changed as well. Well, I had no problems helping her out, even though I could only transmute one person per day, because as I stated before, it is exceptionally draining. I don't think I've ate that much food ever and still lost weight. But when we changed her, somebody thought it'd be a slick idea to add an extra tail or two. She was a little ticked off at that at first, until she realized that it seemed to get a lot of attention, and we all know about ladies and attention. That being said, after about a week or two, we had a distress call come in. We ran immediately to find out what was going on, and it turns out the group had come into some sort of trouble in the next sector. So we rushed to go help out, and we were getting mixed reports of other humans. But what the hell would other humans be doing way the hell out here? Was it elves? Because elves can be mistaken for humans very easily. They said, no, these were not humans. These were, I even had trouble saying this. They were fucking vampires. No, not the sparkly type, but actual vampires. When the group landed, it turned out that they had sent out an envoy to go speak with those in charge. The vampires that were there were stuck on a planet that was basically shrouded. They had very, very little light coming in, and they didn't like to spend a lot of time outside. To them, even spending a little time in what they called a blood moon, which reflected off their red sun, was about the same as one of us going out on a bright, sunny day at 2 in the afternoon, 1 to 2 in the afternoon, with absolutely no protection on our skin. They would burn. So they were mostly subterranean. However, these suckers, they had magic, and they used it. Surprising everybody when these vampires came out to talk to them. They came out in the most debonair fashion. They had that same old look that everyone knows. And as I watched the video of somebody's camera, I was starting to think this has to be cut from some sort of TV show where the CGI is just really good, because there's no freaking way this is real. Sure enough, they came up and were polite, invited the envoy into their homes. They sat down and talked and were offered a drink. However, the envoy was hesitant to drink anything with the color red because they immediately knew what they were facing. Unfortunately for them, they did not have a lot of magic users and were very, very unhappy with the fact that the vampires began to insist that those in the envoy give a sort of tribute. Well, the tribute they were referring to was to leave at least 2 or 3 of their own behind to be basically blood banks, repositories, something they could feed off of over time, which immediately gave a bad taste in the human's mouth. However, it wasn't long before the vampires used their magic to move around the room, levitating themselves from one place to another, thinking that they could simply get around everyone, get behind us, and take out our people. But our people were not stupid. Somehow we had dealt with these before, and some of the old ways truly helped. As it turned out, yes, they were slightly allergic to silver, though it didn't seem to matter much, as silver was not a common metal used in military equipment. They did not like crosses, although only one that was consecrated would do any sort of damage, and this surprised everyone. But then again, if I gave a cross over to Cassie, well, bad shit would happen there too. That being said, the most effective tool they had was a non-IR flashlight. This burned them. It burned the vampires, but it also pissed them off. They were actually a bit envious on our ability to fight against them as the envoy backed away. I watched on one screen the video of what was happening, and on another I could see the dots of their location as they tried to move away. And then a scan went over and they realized that this envoy was not making it out alive. What in the hell have we gotten ourselves into? Without hesitation, they bolted at the envoy with everything they had from all directions. Even though they may or may not have gotten a few of these stinking vamps, the envoy didn't make it back to the ship, and the vampires feasted. It was on the video as one of them had actually removed the liver from a still breathing female and began to eat it. It wasn't that they simply sucked the blood, but anything the blood was attached to was a meal. For some reason, vampires could not maintain hemoglobin and needed to recharge with someone else's. There are very few places in the body that actually have as much blood as the liver. However, the one thing they all fought over was different organs, and especially the heart. The heart and the lungs were things that you could hear them argue over all the time. The translation software, since we didn't have a magical upgrade for it at all, magical translation was only done person to person, had to figure out what they were saying, and what they said horrified everyone, as we could hear these freaking bloodsuckers fighting over the different organs, saying, "This one's mine, it's my kill, I deserve this, I'm higher ranking," and all this other bullshit. We were requested to go in and get back what little we could from the envoy, even if it was just their dog tags and maybe a watch or two, something for the families back home. This would be another sector we would have to stay away from, but that was not what caused the main issue with the Vamps. FYI, they don't like being called Vamps. When we finally arrived, I used my magic along with other magic wielders to keep a protective barrier around us as we went straight towards what their version of a castle was. This castle, this mausoleum, was just absolutely massive, and it was difficult to figure our way around if it wasn't for our ability to simply scan an area using magic, and also using the scanners that every single person had attached to their arm to make sure they knew where we had to go. Eventually, we found, well, we didn't find much. A few scraps of clothes, and we knew the Vamps were close. The one in charge of our group screamed at them to return the effects of the fallen, and the Vamps simply laughed. But they wouldn't be laughing for very long, as one of the soldiers dropped a flashbang grenade and yelled, "Cover!" before we all moved our eyes away. The shield itself is able to protect us from the concussive blast, but the light itself would still come through the shield. With that, the Vamps began to scream in absolute pain, as they seemed to have much stronger acuities when it comes to sight and to sound, and began to drop from the ceilings and around corners, grasping their heads. They started demanding to know what we had done, what magic we had used. And one of our men looked and said, "That wasn't sorcery, you dick. That was good old-fashioned science." It looked at us, almost with a sheer hatred in its eyes. You dare to face us with something other than magic and sorcery?" I looked at him and slowly used my magic to raise him up by the throat. Yes, I did do a force choke on him, and then launched him against the wall. I figured this one was probably the one in charge. And I screamed, "Where are their effects, asshole?" It did not want to even say anything until I started squeezing its torso very, very slowly. It could feel as though a vice had begun to push from both sides of its rib cage, and it began to talk only as it heard its ribs begin to crack. Everyone told me to calm down, but the only one that could calm me down was Talia, who had insisted on going with us. She looked and said, "This is why we don't come over here." Finally, we retrieved their effects and backed away, the Vamps looking at us with sheer vitriol in their eyes. Not as though we had damaged their pride, but they also had this streak of envy running through their eyes. It was strange, although the fact that they all had green eyes didn't hurt the idea. They demanded to know everything. They wanted to become more like us, but we just wanted to get our stuff and get the hell out of there. These Vamps were dangerous. And as we left, a few of the folks we had transformed ran over towards us to try and help to get our people back in, to grab some of the effects, and the Vamps suddenly began to roar out. The roar echoed across the entire planet, almost as though it was a battle cry. We all almost had to cover our ears because it was just almost deafening around. The one in charge said, "What is that? How dare you? How dare you take that from us? That was our meal. That is our food. You will not take our food from us." One of the other magic users yelled back, "You had your fill, dickhead. Probably got a dick down your throat right now," which made a few of us chuckle when he said that. However, this seemed to almost enrage the Vamps to the point where they tried to charge the shield again. However, this time they were too close to the shuttles and the guns got online. I don't care what type of immortal beings you are, good old-fashioned firepower is not something they want to screw with, especially after they saw one of the point defense cannons cut one of their own in pieces as the projectiles pierced the body as it dove down towards us. The force of the concussion going through the body, which was still basically a water balloon just like all the rest of the humans, exploded from the pressure. This was enough to send a shower of blood down, but this was not blood that the Vamps went to eat. No. In fact, they looked disgusted at it. Yet they also looked at the guns and simply said, "We will let you leave in peace if you give us those. We desire this." Emotion towards all the different technology we had. We denied them that, and we pulled away as best we could. As we got onto the shuttle, we could see that they sheer sheer anger they had. And we went back to try and get a hold of the rest of the beastkins and get them off their planet, because we knew if they were hungry, they would find a way over, and sure enough, they did. I always knew magic was strong, but I did not even consider the fact that you could jump from planet to planet. All they had to do was remote view just a little bit, just enough to get them there, and then open some sort of dark energy portal and walk through like it was nothing. By the time we got to their planet, they had gone into a blood fury and started taking down any of the animals that we had transmogrified. The sheer horror of watching one of these young kids who had just become smart enough to realize that they were being used as food, suddenly being held down as this vampire sucked its claws into its leg, ripping a huge piece of meat from its thigh, and the blood shooting up from one of its arteries, and the vampire drinking it like it's coming out of a water fountain. This put us all in a rage. We magic users didn't even get back in time to see all the carnage, as it took several days of travel time, even at FTL speeds, to get us there. No. The standard infantry had had enough. They saw what these vamps had done to children, women, the elderly, the infirm. They had just tore them apart without mercy, and now our infantry are going to show them no mercy as well. Though the vamps would be susceptible mainly to silver, it did not matter when you had that much concussive force coming out of a 50 caliber machine gun. They tore into the vamps and tried to save as many as possible. By the time we got there, most everybody had been saved that could be saved. We ran over, and immediately those of us that could went to work trying to regenerate limbs and close wounds as best we could. But I had to sit there and watch Talia hold on to a friend she had made. Another young girl that looked about her age. Even though I knew Talia would age so much slower, it was heartbreaking to see as she held on to the body of this young girl. I ran over as best I could and tried to save her, but even I knew the moment I tried that there was nothing I could do. These blood-sucking sons of bitches had drained too much, and everything was failing. I can do a lot of things, but I cannot just make blood out of thin air. It doesn't work that way. I closed her wounds and gave her a few minutes, but that's all I could give her was a few more minutes. As we began to collect all the wounded and treat them as best we could, I knew it would take a lot more magic than anything we had. Thankfully, the surgeons could do what they do, and the medics could still do what they do, and what they do best. And what they do best is almost magic in and of itself. And they saved so many, kept them alive long enough so that we could do our work to make sure they stayed alive and got healthy. And by the time we had got across the planet to help out all the villages that had been ravaged by these incoming blood-sucking bastards, our reinforcements had arrived. The reinforcements that had been sent over to the Ogre space to try and bring a peace. However, they looked even worse for wear than we did, but we were grateful to have the extra space. As I helped bring a few others onto the ships, I looked over and I saw Cassie carrying a few others. Talia, being that she's a dragonborn, was extremely strong and had picked up several others, even holding a small one with her tail. And I saw them lay everyone down, and as the last ones got inside the ship, I looked down, I grabbed my girls, one in each hand, and I held them close to me. And I simply said, "Let's go home." It was not a fun trip. The entire time we had to ration our rations. We had to ration our water. I went several days without water and food until I almost collapsed. Using up that much energy trying to keep people alive and not eating is a bad recipe. Think of running a marathon but never having any water. going and working out with heavy weights but never eating any food. Now put those together. Other magic users almost slipped into a coma as they tried their best. I give my props to the medics and the other doctors on board as they did everything humanly possible and then some. I kind of wish I could just open up their ability to do magic, but again, that could be dangerous. Finally, when we get back to the planet, we had begun the process of transmuting the rest of the beastkin to as far to human as they wanted to be. Many of them chose to be more beast-like, others not. But we found a way to make sure that they could integrate into human society on Earth. Or Proxima 3, Mars, Venus. We had even on Io, we had colonies that had begun to stretch out beyond the cradle of Earth. Luna was now covered in buildings. You couldn't even look at the moon from the planet Earth and not see at least one man-made structure with the naked eye. So we found a place for them, a place where they could build themselves back up. The Dragonborn decided to choose a place of their own as well. Not surprising, they chose the most mountainous region as they could find, because that was just a reminder of home. However, it would be some time, and we knew it would be time before we could finally settle down. When I said goodbye one time to Talia as we would leave for about a week, I had another one of my meetings I had to get to, as sorcery had become a main article of contention around the world. It turns out, with all the troubles we had been having outside human society, inside human society, it had been gotten so much worse. There were many that looked at sorcery as the devil's own curse and would shun anyone who had the abilities. This made it very difficult in some areas as I walked with Cassie and they would start screaming demon, demon in whatever language was in that area. I know she still had the dark magic flowing through her veins. She couldn't stop that. She was born this way. I asked her a few times if she wanted to be changed, but she liked her form. She liked the fact that I still found her more than a little attractive. She liked the fact that she was tall. She enjoyed having a tail even. It came in handy on more than one occasion. However, it wasn't until we had finally gotten to Rome that I saw the true extent of what was going on. We both went in. I had made an appointment to go into the Vatican itself. However, Cassie had difficulty walking around that area. I told her, "You think this is bad? Wait till we get to Jerusalem." She looked at me sideways as she didn't know what I was talking about. However, I still remember walking into one of the basilicas, and she was having trouble staying on her feet. She was surprised at the fact that when we got to the front, the preacher was already there with his Bible open with a big smile on his face. From either side, a few of our friends came out, to include Talia, and she was just standing there holding that bouquet as she handed it to Cassie. And then, using her wings to elevate herself, she simply reached up and put that veil on Cassie's head. This picture went all over the entire planet and then beyond, to let everyone know that even though we may be human, we can't all just be human. There's a bigger, much bigger universe out there. Though we are not the only ones, or the first ones for that matter, it just became a more famous picture. Maybe because of my standing as a mage, but it is what it is. I thought at that moment we had found some sort of peace. However, peace is only found in short pieces. I would find this out as 2 days later, we were simply walking along and I felt that cold air. It was like lightning had gone down my spine. I had suddenly frozen in place. What the hell was that? Every single magic wielder across the planet could feel that. what the hell was going on. We looked up to the sky, and one of the portals that we had seen the vampires use had opened above us. And I looked around, I could see off in the distance at least one more, possibly a second one, opening up around the planet. What the hell was going on? What the fuck was going on? Seriously. I've never felt this type of power before. This is insane. Did we piss off God? What the hell just happened? And then we saw them coming through. We saw ships of different sizes, different proportions, but all clearly we had seen before, followed by these huge monstrous stones that seemed to come out in the upper atmosphere and then slowly begin to break away as other items began to fall from them and then take flight. We saw these small gateways open up on the ground as we saw these humanoid things coming out in full coverings to protect them from the sun as they began to come out and tear at people. We saw all 7 of them, and they had brought with them the pride of the elves, the wrath of the ogres, the gluttony of the Lamias as they began to grab people and swallow them whole. The sloth of the dragons was no longer held back as they began to fly around. The envy from the vampires, and shockingly, even the goblins came in with their lust. All 7 of them. It had not occurred to me until that moment. We were not just in a magic war, but we were in a holy war as we've now faced down the 7 deadly sins. I looked out with my magic. I scanned as deep as I could, and I realized that every single planet, every single colony under human control was now being invaded. We had gone out into the universe to try and make friends, but apparently we had only made enemies. I looked at Cassie for the first time with fear in my eyes, as I did not want to lose her. However, when I looked back, I realized that even though we would have to face them, we would not have to fight them alone.